All right, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Anjay Rastogi, and today we have a very important chat or educational program called Diet and Nutrition, What a Kidney Patient Should Know. And we have a wonderful speaker in Jenna Copley. But before that, there's a couple of housekeeping things. Please do ask questions, but don't put any detailed personal questions in the chat because this is for your general public. If there are personal questions, we can always direct them to a dietitian. The second thing, like I said, is going to be very interactive, and feel free to reach out after the event as well. The purpose of these chats is to educate our audience, so don't make any changes unless you speak to your healthcare provider. And like any chat, the talk by the speaker is their own opinions. So we can't validate that, we can't support it, but the speakers, as you know, that we bring on are speakers that we vet and validate. So, but what they speak is on their own. So please keep that in mind as well. Now, for diet and nutrition, I always say you are what you eat, and diet and nutrition becomes medicine after a point, especially for our kidney patients. And I also differentiate, always get asked is, what's a kidney healthy diet? And I think it's very important to separate what's a kidney healthy diet from a kidney restricted diet. And let me give how these two things are different. A kidney healthy diet is a diet that you eat to keep your kidneys healthy. And I always say what's good for your heart is good for your kidneys, whether it be keeping yourself hydrated, avoiding these highly processed and fried foods, also avoiding high protein, which is more for kidney than for heart. But overall, that is a kidney friendly or kidney healthy diet. Now, kidney restricted diet is a bit different. As your kidney disease advances, your kidney's capacity to get rid of waste products, electrolyte, acid, bases gets limited. And then you have to restrict few things in your diet, whether it be potassium, whether it be sodium, whether it be phosphorus. But one of the most common mistake people make is to just say kidney diet. And the kidney diet means low sodium, low potassium, low phosphorus. That is not accurate. If you're on a kidney restrictive diet, then you need to go by your labs. So you need to look at your labs. For example, even though most of the kidney diseases lead to hyperkalemia, or high potassium, there are kidney conditions in which your potassium is low. And if you're on a low potassium diet in that situation, it's going to actually cause more harm than good. So I think that is something important. And our speaker today will go over that in a lot more detail. I also wanted to take a moment to thank our core kidney program at UCLA Health that puts this program together, our wonderful undergraduate club, the Bruin Beans, that actually are putting this event together, and all our attendees that have been participating in our past events. We do have a channel called the Core Kidney channel on YouTube. So if you go there, you'll see all our past chats and other presentations over there as well. So with that, it's my distinct honor and pleasure to actually introduce our speaker today. Her name is Miss Jenna Copley. Jenna is a registered licensed dietitian based in Honolulu, Hawaii. She received her Bachelor of Science in Human Nutrition and Dietetics or diet from University of North Carolina at Greensboro, and her Master's of Science in Healthcare Management from University of Rhode Island. Jenna is currently with the National Kidney Foundation of Hawaii, working on an interdisciplinary team to provide health awareness and prevention education focused on kidney health and contributing diseases such as diabetes and hypertension. I actually met Jenna when I was in Hawaii at the NKF, the National Kidney Foundation meeting, and I saw her speak, and I've been in touch with her ever since. And she's amazing, wealth of knowledge. But I think what I like about her most, and our other wonderful dietitian, which I don't think has joined today, Shima, and some of the other dietitians, they're very fair and balanced. And that's the dietitian that you really want to look at, that doesn't push things, actually evaluates the science behind the dietary recommendations and modifies your diet based on that. So, Jenna, thank you for being here all the way from Hawaii. And the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Stogie. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited that we can continue to keep in touch with Core Kidney. I am so grateful to be able to put on this presentation today. I have kind of moved our presentation a little bit around today for this talk. Here in Hawaii, our population has a very specific diet, and a lot of the times well, of course, always, I tailor my presentations towards that. So I'm very happy to be here to kind of expand things more towards our mainland population as well. So thank you so much for having me. So first things first, I want to kind of go over lightly about how a dietitian works on the healthcare team. So dietitians are medical professionals that focus on nutrition and how nutrition contributes to your overall health and the health of your chronic disease. So dietitians play a really, really important role. They also get a lot longer with patients. We really get to sit down and talk to you and see how you are doing, what your current lifestyle is, and how we can find small ways to improve your lifestyle through nutrition. And we do that, we do small changes, and that's the way that we really like to make these long-term impacts. So before I ever get started, the first thing I do is I say it's always great to work with a dietitian. If you can find a dietitian around you, they really are able to find that middle ground with you that lets you continue to live your life the way that you want to, but also find the ways you can do these small changes that's going to help your health long term. Dietitians are actually not as well utilized as we wish we were. This is a recent research study that came out that talked to nephrologists, primary care physicians, and even dietitians. And about 48% of chronic kidney disease patients have never seen a dietitian. And we would love to make that number go down a whole lot, or go up a whole lot. We want to have all of our patients be seen by a dietitian because these small changes, they can make a huge impact. 61% of patients express interest, but haven't seen a dietitian because they aren't referred. But 90% of medical providers believe that medical nutrition therapy or seeing a dietitian is essential. So when you are looking for trying to get in touch with a dietitian, I really recommend you talk to your primary care provider, you talk to your nephrologist, and you are able to get connected. Dietitian services, if you do have chronic kidney disease, is covered under most main insurance companies. It's with almost or zero copay. Obviously, it's different for each individual person, and each individual service provider that you might have for your insurance. But most of the time, they are incredibly affordable. And dietitians want to make sure that it's incredibly affordable for you. So if you are looking for a dietitian in your area, I always recommend going to eatright.org/find a nutrition expert. There is a whole list of all of the qualified dietitians who have been able to have gone through the certification process to become a dietitian, which is quite lengthy, and they're going to be a wealth of knowledge for you no matter where you are. Um, I always recommend if you are looking at nutrition information online to look back for articles that are written by a medical provider or or like a doctor or also a dietitian, because dietitians are absolutely a wealth of knowledge and they're really something that you can lean on when you are looking things up for yourself. Because today I'm going to go over some very general things because when it comes to the kidney diet, everybody's diet is going to be different. And that's why it's important to work with a dietitian. So, we're going to go over some general steps to eat well for your kidneys. But again, when it comes to each one of these things, it changes. And being able to have a provider that can look at your labs and really individualize things for you is definitely the way to go. So, first things first, I got 5 steps, 5 easy steps to eat well or eat smart for your kidneys. The first three steps everybody can do. But when it comes to the last 2 steps, that's when it's going to be something that you really need to talk to your medical provider about. And that's when we want to consult with our nephrologists, our primary care physicians, and then also a dietitian. But the first three things we're all going to get on board with. So first, we're going to choose and prepare foods with less salt and sodium. We're going to eat the right types and the right amounts of protein. And we're also going to choose foods that are heart healthy overall. Now, these last two steps, this is when I'm going to say this about 20 more times in this presentation, I promise, is that we're going to talk to our providers about is choosing foods with less phosphorus and choosing foods to have the right amount of potassium. What we really want to do when we're looking at these last two, which I'll jump far into later on in this presentation, is that we don't want to limit these too early because phosphorus and potassium are a healthy part of our diet. And if we start to exclude them before we really have to, we end up excluding a lot of foods that are overall really, really good for us. So we want to watch when we are starting to exclude these foods when it's medically necessary for us to do so. So this is the first three steps are going to be, again, a kidney healthy diet. And then this is when we get a little bit more restrictive. But again, not necessary for everybody. Please talk to your provider about it. Okay, so first things first, we're going to choose and prepare foods with less salt and sodium. So on average, Americans eat more than 3,400 milligrams of sodium each day. And this is put out by the American Heart Association. And that's quite a lot. So I like utilizing the chat feature. I'm a fan of it. So if you don't mind, if anyone has a guess about how much salt you think you should be having every single day. If 3,400 is the average American, how much do you think you should be having every day? Okay, I see 1,000, 2,000. Seeing a lot of 2,000s. All right, all good guesses. You guys are right around it. Perfect. Okay. So the American Heart Association wants you to have about 2,300, which I see somebody has just put in there. Um, and that's how much they recommend to most adults for the day. Again, this is the general recommendation. But the American Heart Association would love for you to go even lower than that at about 1,500. And that's more of a lot limited. And so if we can keeping below that 2,300, and if you can get down to even 1,500, that's fantastic. But a lot of times it can be hard for a lot of us. So as I said, I practice here in Hawaii. And here in Hawaii, we put shoyu or soy sauce on a whole lot of things. We put it on our rice, we use it in sauces. We use it quite often. So I don't know if I hope that you can kind of you can kind of think about it when you use soy sauce. How much sodium do you think is in 1 tablespoon of soy sauce? Because we've all tasted before. It's a little bit salty, but what do you think? Okay, I see 500, I see 400. All right. All good guesses. And a lot of you are pretty close. So usually, again, it depends brand to brand because everything's a little bit different. But normally it's going to be around 850 milligrams of salt in just a tablespoon of soy sauce. Now that's quite a lot, right? When we're trying to aim for, if we were trying to aim for 1,500 or if we're trying to aim for 2,300. So all of those, just thinking about where a lot of our salt is even coming from. So most of our salt is going to come from processed foods or from restaurant foods. And we have very little to do with any of that, right? Because especially when we go to restaurants, the food tastes amazing. And so they're probably using quite a bit of salt in there. And most of our restaurants don't have nutrition facts attached to them. So we really don't know how much salt is going to be in some of those restaurant foods. However, in processed foods, a lot of times we have those nutrition labels, which we are going to check out in a little bit. But most of the time, that is where our salt is coming from. It's not necessarily coming from those naturally occurring. I always say the added while eating. I had one patient who told me it's definitely coming from the added while I'm eating because he had a heavy hand with the salt shaker. And I say it's different for everybody. But most of the time it's coming from our more processed foods. So it's important while we're looking at that, we're trying to look at our nutrition labels and really know where things are coming from. Now, we're trying to decrease the salt and sodium in our diet overall because we're trying to take care of our blood pressure. There's pretty good correlations that show the more salt we have, we also will have an increase in our blood pressure, and we take care of our heart, we're also taking care of our kidneys. So watching out for this salt and also is a really good idea when we want to make sure that we're taking care of our kidneys overall. Good guesses, everybody, by the way. Okay, so some of the ways we can do this is obviously buying more fresh food versus packaged food. We can pick lower sodium options of convenience foods. So we just talked about how much salt is going to be in some of our low sodium options, correct, or in some of our soy sauce options that are normal soy sauce. But what about the low sodium options? So in 1 tablespoon of that low sodium options, I'm talking about the green one when we're in the restaurant, or hopefully the green one on the shelf. How much salt do you think is in 1 tablespoon of those low sodium options? Okay, 550, 200. Okay, I see some 400s, 600. Okay, all good guesses. So actually, when we look at the low sodium options for the soy sauce, the green cap one, it's if you looked closely at the wording on the actual package, it is the less sodium soy sauce. So it's not low sodium soy sauce, it's less. So it's less than the original. So in order for them to market it to be accurate, all it has to be is less than whatever the red cap is. So typically, a less sodium soy sauce is actually probably around 700 milligrams. So, that's about 150 milligrams less than the red one, which is awesome. We're getting lower than the original one, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a low sodium product. So see, there was that differentiation there. Marketing, our marketers are really, really good at trying to get us to buy things when they're going to look a little bit healthier than the original, and we may use more of it because we think it's healthier. But we really can't know unless we turn it around and actually look at that nutrition facts label. So while I totally endorse looking for the low sodium options of things, I think it's a great option. It still means that we need to look at the nutrition label and also look at the quantity that we're using. So when we talk about looking at choosing foods less salt and sodium, for people who typically use canned vegetables or canned beans or anything like that, it's definitely something that we want to look more towards our lower sodium options. But if we aren't doing that, when we are, let's just say, getting a can of beans, actually dumping it into a colander and rinsing off all of the preservatives and maybe some of that extra sodium that's utilized in packaging, that can be a great way to kind of get some of that extra salt out of there. And that way, we can add in all of our other great herbs and spices to make it taste the way that we want to have it, rather than the way that the packaging has it on it for us. So that's all about where we're going here, is we're trying to make the food have the amount of salt that we put on it, and the taste that we put on it, and not necessarily the taste that the packaging puts on it for us. So when we're trying to make our food taste great, especially when we're lowering the salt in our diet, it's super important to create other really good flavors in there. So trying to use other herbs and spices and sodium-free seasonings. Here in Hawaii, we love our big box stores, and they actually sell these great big sodium-free seasonings. And I always say that we want to look towards our sodium-free seasonings that are just a bunch of herbs and spices that make things taste better. But we also want to keep an eye on the salt replacements that are actually just potassium and because potassium can also kind of give a salty taste for us. So not all sodium-free seasonings are built the same. And I'm going to jump into it a little bit later in our presentation when we talk about potassium, but I always do advocate for our sodium-free seasonings that are just really good herbs and spices kind of all mixed together already for us. When we're trying to create good flavor, you can never go wrong with some garlic, onion, and ginger, or even utilizing some citrus, some acids like vinegar and or like lemon juice to flavor our food better. Food that has less salt in it does not have to be bland food. It is all up to you. And experimenting different ways that you can get in this flavor without you using salt, it's a learning curve, but it's definitely one to invest in. Okay, so we want to use all of the information that we get on our packaging, but the front of the package sometimes can be a little bit misleading when we are looking at some of our things. Marketing people are amazing at their jobs, and we should all keep that in mind whenever we're at the grocery store and something looks healthy to us. They're so good at their job, and it's their job and they're good at it. But we need to be detectives and find the ways that we can wash out if something is actually going to be healthy for us, if it's not. My favorite thing that they put on packaging is things that are like when they say something's gluten-free. And everybody thinks gluten-free, it must be healthy for me. But it'll be something that's already gluten-free, like oats. Oats are always gluten-free, and they'll advertise it on there like it's healthy. And oats are healthy. But we want to look a little bit closer instead of just taking the marketing tactics at face value. So when we're looking at the front of the packages, some of these things can be great to look for, like unsalted, sodium-free, salt-free, very low sodium. All these things actually, or except lightly salted, those all these things are good things to look out for, but they're not necessarily going to be the be-all end-all of what we need to look for on our packaging. And we got to look at is the nutrition label. I and every other dietitian that you talk to are the biggest fans of nutrition labels because they are the most helpful when it comes to things. So, if anyone can put in the chat, what is the first thing that you look for when you look at a nutrition label? All right, you guys are on it. I already see my answer that I was looking for. Um, which is multiple people got it, which I'm very impressed with, is serving size, which is awesome. Okay, the first thing that you want to look at on every nutrition label is going to be the serving size. And the reason why is because it's the context of everything else this is talking about, right? One of my favorite things or I like to look at, sometimes we'll look at like drinks, like sometimes like the iced teas that are on the shelves, right? If you look at them and you look at them without looking at the serving size, it'll be like calories, 100, and you're like, okay, that's not so bad, right? But if you look at the serving size per container is going to be 2, and the serving size is half a can. And I don't know about you, once you crack open a can, you can't uncrack it. Most of the time you're going to drink the whole thing. And that's okay. But the thing is, we need to look at the context for the rest of it. So when it comes to that, whatever the calories are, whatever the potassium is, all those things, we need to be able to double them. So for example, we're looking at this nutrition facts right here, and the serving size is 2/3 of a cup. Now, 2/3 of a cup is probably the amount that could fit in my hand right here of cereal. Now, I don't know about you, but if I had 2/3 of a cup of cereal, I would be absolutely starving afterwards, and it would be not enough food for me, right? So maybe if I wanted to have this be something that I was going to eat for a meal, I would probably need to double it, and then it's a cup and a third. And so then I would need to double everything down here. So the calories are double. All of this is going to go up. So that's why it's most important to look at the serving size before we start looking at everything else. So if you were listening to me earlier and you heard me talk about sodium and how much sodium you should be having every day, and the number already went outside of your brain. I'm gonna give you a little bit of a hack to make things a little bit easier for you to remember all of those great big numbers that come up, right? So when we're looking to reduce salt, we're going to be looking at sodium here. Now the sodium in this is 160 milligrams. Stick with me, we're going to do a little bit of math. Don't let me lose you now. But we're going to look, instead of looking at this number right here, we're actually going to pan over and look at the percent daily value here. Now, the percent daily value is given to us so we can make a little bit quicker decisions on things rather than spending our whole entire grocery trip staring at the nutrition label. So the percent daily value is going to be what the FDA said that if all of these numbers add up to 100%, then the most average person that we could find is going to have the most perfect diet in the entire world. Now, first of all, none of us are the most average person in the world. We're all different, so we all have different needs. But this gives us a good jumping off point for what we should be looking at when we are trying to find what's the best for us overall. So if this number, this sodium number, adds up to 100%, then we are going to get that 2,300 milligrams of salt for the day. And so we want to make sure that over the course of the day, that 7% doesn't move all the way up to 100%. We want to keep it below there. So when we're looking at all these different numbers, some of these numbers we would love to have below 100%, and then other numbers we would love to have above 100%. So for example, we would love to have our dietary fiber above 100%. Dietary fiber plays a huge role in our body. It is great for our heart and overall good for digestion and helping us go to the bathroom more consistently. And most Americans do not get enough fiber in their diet. So it's an easy, great thing for us to start doing is watching out for how much fiber we're getting. So that's a great one. And maybe we also, but we want to watch our sodium to make sure our sodium is under 100%. And maybe we also want to take a look at our added sugars to make sure those don't go too high either. So when we're looking at my bowl of cereal in the morning, right, we are looking at our serving size. I'm having 2 servings of this. And so now my sodium here is now not 7%, it's going to be 14%. Now, granted, I am having 3 meals for the day, which I hope that spacing out your meals for about 3 times a day is a great idea. And so overall, I want to keep my sodium under about 20%, 25% for each meal throughout the day. So that way, I'm not just getting a whole bunch of sodium at one meal, I'm kind of spacing it out over the course of the day. And overall, through the whole course of the day, I don't want it to add up to 100%. I want it to be below that. So when we are looking to do this, that is a great way to utilize the nutrition label overall. Now, we're going to jump into some of these other things a little bit later in the chat, but you can also see potassium there at the bottom, which is always a good indicator that some of our nutrition labels also have potassium. Okay, so when we're looking at some of our higher sodium foods and our lower sodium foods, you're going to see here that one of these sides looks a lot more red than the other sides. And you'll also notice on the lower sodium foods, there are also just going to be a lot of whole foods. And so we're trying to lean more towards our fresh fruits and vegetables, the things that don't necessarily come in packaging, and trying to lean away from a lot of our packaged foods that are not necessarily fresh and are also that are a lot more processed than a lot of our lower sodium and whole foods. Okay. So that is when we're going to choose foods with less salt and sodium, but we also want to eat the right amounts and the right types of protein. So I know there's a lot of interest in the nutrition in nutrition about protein. But in actually, the only average American male only actually requires about 8 ounces of protein a day. And for a lot of kidney patients, keeping our protein intake to a lot lower can be really beneficial for us overall. When we are looking at the right types and the right amounts of proteins, we want to eat smaller portions. We especially want to eat smaller portions of highly processed foods. If you've ever been to Hawaii people love spam musubis, which is spam, which a lot of people may on the mainland might not have as much. But for here, it's something that's very, very common. And trying to keep away from a lot of our more processed foods, then that actually also includes deli meats, can be really beneficial overall. So we're trying to keep all of these processed meats down to a minimum. We're trying to swap out red meats for healthier meats, and we're trying to consume less meat overall. So overall, I would love for people to kind of transition more into plant-based eating. Now, plant-based eating, in my opinion, is probably the most beneficial and well-researched diet for chronic kidney disease that can really shows in so many different studies that it really can slow down progression and keep you at a more consistent GFR level. Um, I have had, there's research studies out there. I've seen anecdotal patients who have gone plant-based completely, and then they have put off going on dialysis. And so it really is different for each individual person, but there is a whole bunch of research that shows slowing the progression of earlier and late stages of kidney disease and how that can be a really great tool overall. So plant-based is going to be a little bit less strict than just vegan or just vegetarian. Plant-based, as I say here, is an eating pattern that focuses primarily on plants. So this includes not only fruits and vegetables, which of course is something that we want to have, but also nuts, seeds, oils, whole grains, legumes, and beans. It doesn't mean that you are a vegetarian or a vegan or that you never have dairy or meats, but it's that you're more proportionately choosing foods that are from plant sources over other sources. So there are a lot of other diets out there that kind of you that have some that people are more trending towards when it comes to chronic kidney disease. For example, there's some studies that are coming out now about the ketogenics diet. Personally, I think that there just needs to be a lot more research that comes out with that. So when it comes to those types of diets, it is extremely restrictive. And when it is really difficult for people to get to the point of getting to ketosis, which is when the benefits start happening. And getting to that point is really, really challenging, and it's also challenging to continue. Now, also, around the ketogenic diet, it also shows that you should have more meats and also have more fats, and you're decreasing the amount of carbohydrates that you have, which might also decrease some of the really healthy parts of your overall diet. So it can be challenging to have a well-rounded diet that's going to continue to support you when you are also on a keto diet overall. Now, personally, I think that there needs to be a whole lot more research on it before I would ever consider it to use it with any one of my patients. But I think that I would wait for that data before I look at anything else. When it comes to any diets, though, what I say is that a diet that works for you, a diet that you can do forever, is the right diet for you. And so continuing to be on a keto diet can be challenging when it comes to really long term. And so I will always look at diets that people can do forever. And a plant-based diet is definitely going to be one of those diets that people fall into and are able to continue it. The world is changing now when it comes, and there's a whole lot more plant-based options when you're going out to eat. And well, so when I say plant-based, I say there's a lot of research on it, I also am very aware that people have been plant-based for thousands of years. Plant-based is not some new concept that we came up with. It's very deeply rooted in so many different cultures across the world, and it's been utilized so well with all those cultures. So kind of moving back to that plant-based is definitely what I support overall. And I'm looking forward to the research that comes out in the future, but right now I don't believe that it's there at this point in time. So when we are kind of moving towards plant-based eating, I always want to encourage people to keep an open mind when it comes to things. So here in Hawaii, this is a very common plate lunch type meal where when you might be going to lunch, and you'll be saying, I'm gonna go have some kalbi for lunch, or I'm going to have some steak for dinner, right? And we're thinking about the meat as the main course of our meal, and we're thinking about the meat as around our entire meal. But what I kind of want to change and how keeping a plant-based diet can kind of look like is changing the way that you're thinking about how food is centered on your plate. So when we are looking at something like this, right, doesn't that look a whole lot better? There's a lot more color. Is this going to help keep you filled up for longer? There's a whole lot, those vegetables in there are going to give so much more uh, vitamins and nutrients in there. And you might still have a little bit of your kalbi in there, but the focus of the plate overall is not the meat. The focus of the plate is how beautiful those vegetables are. And that's how we can decrease the amount of protein that we're having throughout our day by adding other really delicious food instead of just taking away the protein and that being it. So this is something that's definitely going to help fill us up, keep us lasting for till our next meal, and overall also fuel our bodies to use that food as medicine. Okay, so that was step two. Last step we're going to move on to is choosing foods that are also healthy for your heart. And when it comes to that, we're going to overall, we want to limit sugary foods and beverages. I would be a very bad dietitian if I didn't tell you to eat your fruits and vegetables. I think we all saw that one coming, right? I might have already said it about a million times in this presentation. But we also want to try to prepare foods that use less fat overall. So trying to grill things, to broil things, baking and roasting versus using deep frying or using a lot of heavier oils. We also want to have moderate caffeine and alcohol consumption. When we are trying to have heart healthy foods, we're trying to prioritize beans and vegetables and nuts and all these really good things on our plate. And the important thing is variety here. We're getting a large variety of different foods, which is overall going to be the most beneficial for us. We can't just eat one food and that be the most healthy food for us. And that's also where I get kind of caught up when people ask me, is this healthy for me? And always, a lot of times, I'm like, yeah, sure, that's going to be healthy for you. But if you only ate macadamia nuts for the entire day, or you had them 3 times a day, no, they're not going to be healthy for you. But they're going to be healthy for you if you have a small amount in moderation. So having the balance of all of these different foods that really help fill your diet is overall going to be the best. And when we talk about foods that are heart healthy and we talk about trying to go more towards whole grains, I don't know if we ever talk about why we want to go more towards whole grains. And this is kind of, I think this graph kind of really helps bridge that gap. So the grain on the left is going to be more of our whole grain. And you'll see here it has the bran, it has the endosperm, and it also has the germ. And all of these different parts, especially the bran, is going to have more of our fiber in there. And the fiber is really important for our heart and also to help control our cholesterol. So when we take away also the bran and the germ out of here, you're also taking away a lot of the fiber, a lot of really healthy vitamin Bs, B vitamins and minerals, and we're just getting the endosperm that's making it from that brown bread, and now it's making it towards that white bread. And we want to choose these whole grains over the refined grains because they keep us fuller for longer. They're going to can help control our blood sugars, and they're also going to help lower our blood pressure. It can help control our blood sugars because fiber does a really good job at kind of helping digestion go a little bit more smoother and also having a better being able to control those carbohydrates as we continue to digest them. So this is overall why it's more important to have a lot of these whole grains compared to some of our their white counterparts. Okay, this is my step 3.5 because I like to add it in here, especially when it comes to heart health, and especially when I talk so heavily about how important fiber is. Because if tomorrow you decided I'm going to increase my fiber intake by a whole bunch, you would definitely have some GI problems. You would be having a very hard time if you didn't drink also have enough water. Because fiber cannot do its job and move through your gut as smoothly unless you also drink enough water. So when I say, you've probably heard this generally, about how generally you can have about 8 to 10 cups of water. And having enough water that way is really great. But again, everybody is going to have different types or might not need to have different quantities of water, depending how if you are out in the sun a lot and all these different, there's lots of different factors. And talk to a provider about how much water you should be having is also a great idea. And when I say 8 to 10 cups, I mean like cups as in, like think cooking cups. So we want to have about 64 ounces or more of water each day. So if you all have a water bottle, my water bottle personally is about 24 ounces. So I know I need to fill this up at least 3 times throughout the day to make sure that I'm getting enough water. It doesn't mean that we're taking 8 actual glasses, which I think can sometimes be intimidating when we're thinking about that number. Okay, so we're choosing foods with less salt and sodium. We're eating the right amounts and the right types of proteins. We're choosing heart healthy foods. And now we're going to get into the choosing foods with less phosphorus and less potassium. Now, especially, I'm going to say this one more time as we're going through this. This is not right for everybody. In order to know if you should be restricting this, I highly recommend talking to your provider about it and also working with a dietitian because it's very different from person to person, how much of this you should be getting per day. And it depends on your labs. So working one-on-one with somebody that can help you kind of navigate it in the best way possible. But again, we'll generally go over how phosphorus and potassium are also processed in our bodies. So when we're choosing foods with less phosphorus, unfortunately, we got to get into the nitty-gritty and we got to look at the ingredients. Because unfortunately, on most of our nutrition facts, we're not seeing exactly how much phosphorus is on there. Most of the time, it's not on that bottom one. So we kind of have to be a little bit like detectives, and we have to look through the ingredients list. And that anything we can find that PHOS inside our ingredients list is something that's going to have phosphorus in it. So also when we're looking at ingredients list, we should all know that when you're looking at the ingredients, they are taking it from the highest weight by ingredient in the product to the lowest. So in this case, I believe that what we're looking at here is actually a coffee creamer. So if we're looking at this in the coffee creamer, the first ingredient that's going to be there is going to be water, which kind of makes sense. And then the next ingredient, next highest concentration, is going to be sugar, and so on and so forth. But when we're reading through this, we're generally going to take a look at for the PHOS here, which as we can see magnesium phosphate, and we'll continue down and we can see calcium phosphate. And then where they tried to trick us with this next one, because the PHOS is in the middle of the word, but it still counts, is pyrophosphate. So there's a whole bunch of additives that contain phosphorus in them, and that is going to be in many different foods. So keeping a lookout for them, especially in our packaged foods, is definitely the way to go, because this is considered what we would call an inorganic form of phosphorus. So because not all types of phosphorus are actually going to be absorbed into our body in the same way. So and that makes it a little bit more challenging. So when we look at the different types of phosphorus, there's going to be what we like to call the organic or like the naturally occurring types of phosphorus. And then there's going to be the additive phosphorus or the inorganic forms. And our body is actually not going to absorb the organic forms or the forms that come in a lot of our whole foods as well in our body as we are going to its inorganic forms, which is going to be in, let's just say, our coffee creamers. So we definitely want to watch out for the high quantities of phosphorus, but when we look at portion sizing, and we look at lists, not everything is going to be absorbed into our body, which makes it all that more complicated to find those lists and find exactly what's going to be right for you. So again, that's why it's a good reason to talk with your medical provider about it. But overall, you can kind of see the theme of how this class is going, is that we're going to continue to move more towards our whole foods and more away from our processed foods that are going to have possibly phosphorus that isn't going to be as beneficial for us long term. So it's always good to look at foods that are going to be high phosphorus containing foods, and I have some listed here. It's very easy to find these, but as we talked about in the last slide, the phosphorus is not as black and white as if this amount of food has this amount of phosphorus in it, and therefore that's how much I'm getting. It does really depend on the quality of it as well. So we are always, when we're looking to watch our phosphorus, we want to watch our portion sizings of some of our foods, but we really want to kind of avoid a lot of our processed foods that will have those phosphorus additives as well. So we talked a little bit about phosphorus. I'm going to also move into potassium. So when we are talking about potassium, the top sources of potassium among US adults are going to be milk and potatoes. And there is definitely ways for you to kind of get some of that potassium outside or out of your potatoes if you are choosing to eat potatoes. It is a complicated process, but a lot of people tell me they have it down to a science. But potassium is also found in beans and nuts and whole grain products. And again, it also works the same way as phosphorus works, is that we want the absorption of the potassium that are in more of our natural forms of potassium are not going to be absorbed as well as the inorganic forms that can also be used as an additive in things. So, for example, in some salt-free seasonings, they use potassium instead of salt, and that they have made it so it tastes a little bit salty. So when we are trying to reduce the amount of potassium that we're having, we're also trying to reduce salt. It's important for us to look at those herb blends rather than just looking for the straight up salt-free seasonings. So when we are watching out for potassium, the potassium is found in these nuts, beans, and whole grain products. We're really just looking um, to watch our large portion sizing of these because potassium in beans and nuts and whole grains are, as we learned earlier, a really important part of our diet. So it's important not to cut out all these things altogether. We really just want to watch portion sizing so we're not having a really large amount of them. Because again, they're organic forms and they're not going to be absorbed as well as some of our more processed forms. Um, of how great for us is potassium is starting to show up more and more on our nutrition labels. I always say that at the end of the day, it's great to look at the ingredients list to see if we can find some of the potassium additives, kind of like what we were looking at with phosphorus, because that is going to be a really good indicator of how much is going to be in there and how much we should be limiting or how much we should be watching the portion size of this product. Okay, so these are our 5 steps to eat smart for your kidneys. Again, the first 3 steps we can all follow and we can all do, but the last two steps of lowering our phosphorus, eating the right amount of potassium is really something that we want to talk to our provider about to make sure it's right for us. When we start to restrict these foods too early, we are also going to decrease our diet quality. And we want to have a good, well-rounded diet overall. So making sure that we're not restricting these too early, because there is no medical research that says restricting phosphorus and potassium early has any benefits overall. Most of the time, it can decrease our diet quality, which is not something that we want to get. It's not something we want to happen at all. All right. So I'm going to transition because I've seen a whole lot of questions come in, and I wanted to make sure that I left enough time at the very end for questions. So let's get get into it.
Hi, Jenna. I can start asking those questions actually.
Sure.
So they're coming through. So first of all, what a wonderful presentation. Um, very, very, and we won't be able to answer all of the questions because there's so many that have come in. Some of them we have answered during your presentation, but some of them I think either we can go over that again or they're important. So one of the question is from can kidney patients have potassium rich foods such as nuts, bananas, avocados, and beans? And you can answer that, and then I'll give my 2 cents on that too.
So, as we talked about with potassium-rich foods, it does depend on where you are in disease progression. And it really does depend on your labs. When it comes to if you don't have a problem and you've talked to your provider and you know you don't have any problem with having potassium, then absolutely you should be having these foods. But beans are really high in fiber. They're going to be overall really good for our blood sugars. Bananas have tons of really good benefits that we should continue to have. It really gets to the point, if we get to that point of needing to restrict, then it's not like these foods need to be thrown out the window. We want to continue to having some of these fruits and vegetables and all these good whole grains, but we want to have them in smaller quantities overall. So maybe you don't have a the whole can of beans. You don't have just a whole bean-based dish, but you have beans on the side, and that's great. We should continue to have those things because they're good for us. But we wouldn't want to have an entire can of beans all in one sitting. That sounds like a lot. But finding the balance that's right for you is definitely when, again, talk to a dietitian and you can find that that's best.
Yep. I mean, so I think, Jenna, just to reinforce what you said, when they say these potassium-rich foods, especially like avocados and you talk of beans and nuts, they have other nutritional values, and I think that has to be kept in mind. So number one, like I said, it's on the kidney disease stage, how advanced they are, because the kidney's capacity to get rid of potassium is immense. So it's not until the very end, stage 4 and 5, that it becomes limited. So that's one. And the second thing, like we discussed throughout this presentation, is your labs. Just because you have kidney disease does not mean that you have high potassium. Some of the patients can have actually low potassium. So I would go by, and then proportions, right? Um, I mean, avocados, if you are at risk of hyperkalemia, probably avocados is not something that I would recommend just because they're so high in potassium, but proportion size is so important as well. Potassium is good for your body, and it's in kidney patients that don't have the capacity to get rid of the potassium. That's when it becomes a problem. If you look at the DASH diet, that's a low sodium, low potassium diet. So go and look at your labs and go and speak to a dietitian before you. The other question is coconut juice good for you?
So coconut water and coconuts are very high in potassium. So it kind of circles back to our original point here is they are very high, and if you aren't having the point that you need to restrict and you're looking at your labs, then it can be good for you. I always say that it does truly depend on, and I'll say this with any food, is that it does truly depend on the brand to brand. Because if you look at one brand, it might be completely full of added sugars, and it might be a lot more like something that we need to watch out for. Well, in other brands, it might be a lot healthier for us and help replenish some of those electrolytes. So I don't that it's not something that I would recommend to patients that need to restrict potassium, but it's in moderation of all things for patients who don't need to restrict potassium. I wouldn't go crazy and only drink coconut water as your only source of hydration, but moderation as well.
Yep. I think moderation is important, and everything else that comes with. The other question comes is coming: can we eat more potassium and protein after getting a transplant? And I can answer that too if you want.
I was going to say go back to labs because it
Yeah.
does depend on how your labs are doing. So that's a very individual to individual scenario. We need to continue to take care of our kidney and even after we have a transplant. So it does depend on our labs and the reason why we got a transplant as well.
Right. And as far as more potassium and protein um, are concerned, yes, if you're post-transplant, if your kidneys are working well, you definitely don't have a problem with potassium because technically, I mean, post-transplant, there are medications that can raise potassium as well. So you have to go by the labs, but your capacity to eat potassium-rich foods is much higher. And the same thing with protein. Once you get transplanted, you don't have to limit your protein, but I would also not go crazy on protein because protein can cause kidney problems further. So I think that's. I think there's a question that keeps coming on about whole grains. Are they harder for kidneys to process? I don't know what that really means, but is that something you've heard before?
So, first of all, I'm very glad that the whole grains come up because I really
Yeah.
want to circle back to this. So, for the longest time, the kidney diet, as we like to, as I'm sure you've maybe Googled in the past, it's actually been constantly changing. And there for a while we were like, no, kidney patients cannot have any whole grains. And I think that all dietitians would agree now, and the research would agree now, that the how positive that whole grains are on our overall health is a lot more. That we definitely want to have whole grains and we want to prioritize whole grains no matter what. The benefits are immense, and so I would always consider please continue to have whole grains and do not go with our refined grains because as I showed before, whole grains have so many more vitamins, have fiber, and it's best to prioritize them overall. We are, when it comes to kidneys to process, yes, it was a while, we were trying to decrease some of our phosphorus that might be in some of these, but at the end of the day, the benefits are just so greater. So please continue to have whole grains over some of our refined grains.
So we just have a few minutes left, Jenna. So a couple of things for the people whose questions we couldn't answer, email them to us and we will answer them on our social media or our website. And I think the beans can put in our website link. We will start answering those questions. But just a couple of more to end this. Is it true that seed oil is bad for you?
So seed oils, it's hard to lump in. All seed oils kind of together. So seed oils, sure, if it's something that I would not add in seed oils if we're just cooking, but at the end of the day, seed oils they're going to happen in our diet, and keeping them when we're trying to prioritize more of our whole foods, we're going to decrease some of them. And at the end of the day, seed oils are they're really hard to research in general because we're never going to research a human that has never had seed oils before. And so the research is kind of here and there on that. So do I think it's something that I would prefer you to have more whole foods that generally doesn't have that in your diet? Sure. But there's not enough research out there for me to absolutely tell you that you should never have this in your diet at all. So there's um there's pros and cons, and my stance is always to push whole foods over anything else.
Good, good. And I just want to go by the keto diet that keeps coming up, that we need more. At this point, we can't endorse either way. And longer studies will need to be done. I get asked, especially for our PKD patients. So, like Jenna said, we need more data, long-term data, especially. So I think, Jenna, we are up on our time. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation, and I hope you join us in our future sessions. I did mention to them that there were a lot of questions that came in that we just don't have time to answer, but you and Shima are the wonderful dietitian. Would you be able to answer those on our website?
Yeah, sure. I would
Okay.
love that.
And then,
My final
yeah,
plug is that if you are looking for a dietitian, then going to eatright.org, which is the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics website, and they help connect patients with dietitians that are in your area that also might be right for your disease state as well as your insurance.
yeah,
If you are looking to go see a dietitian, I highly recommend going there to find somebody that's right for you.
yeah. And also, I think Shima is our dietitian here too. So
Yes,
she
or
can
seeing
also,
Shima.
yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Jenna. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Okay.
having me.
Thank you. Bye for now.